Okay, welcome class. This is Sensation and Perception Unit. This is the first video for vision. This is part 1. Most of the information on here can be found in the Myers textbook, page 124 to 128. And I suggest you use pages 6 and 7 in your packet. You might need additional paper for some of the notes on the eye. Okay, so vision is the most complex sense. It's the most best developed and most important sense for humans and other highly mobile creatures. Think of the eye as the brain's camera. It gathers light, focuses it, converts it to a neural signal, and then sends the signal for further processing. So today in this presentation, we will spend time looking at the parts of the eye and then understanding how light enters the eye and makes its way through the eye and actually gets then up to the brain. And the third thing that we'll pretty much look at is how light works. Okay, so here is the diagram that you might want to stop and freeze and kind of jot down some basic notes on the different structures of the eye and label the eye diagram in your packet. If you're writing notes, you might want to draw the eye diagram and make sure that you know the different parts. Okay, and I'm going to go through more detail on the specific parts at this point in time. Okay, so number 3 on your diagram was the cornea. Okay, light enters the eye through the cornea. So it's like the basic shield that the light kind of enters through. Okay, once it then enters the pupil, then light passes through the pupil. Okay, on the pupil, there is a small adjustable opening in the eye. Okay, and it is surrounded by the iris. The iris is number 2. The iris is the colored muscle that's around the pupil, and this is actually the part of the eye that moves. Okay, the iris dilates or constricts in response to light energy. So it gets smaller if there's a lot of light in your environment, and it gets bigger, okay, if it's really dark or it expands. So the iris is actually the part of the eye that moves. The pupil, the little black dot, okay, is where light actually enters your eye. That does not move. It's the iris around it. Okay, and then on your diagram you have the lens. The lens is then located right behind the pupil. It focuses incoming light into images on the retina. Okay, it goes through a process of accommodation. This is the process by which the light's lens changes shape to focus near and far objects away. Okay, so we're going to talk about in a little bit if you have problems with understanding, like you can't see far away, or you have problems with focusing up close, it's really blurry. You could have problems with your lens because the lens is the part of the eye that helps focus your eye. So if you think of a lens of a camera, it helps focus the image. That's what the role of the lens does. 5 is the retina. Okay, so on your diagram, it's kind of towards the, you can see it towards the back there. The retina is the multi-layered tissue on the eyeball, sensitive inner surface. This is where transduction takes place. So light now is going to change to an impulse. It helps convert the energy into impulses. So we talked during the first presentation about transduction. Transduction is when it goes from the stimulus, so light, and changes into an impulse. Light can't go all the way up to your brain. It's got to be sent in some sort of message. Okay. Actually, the retina receives the images upside down, but it's flipped once it gets up to the brain. Okay. The retina contains rods and cones, which help us to detect differences between black and white, and we'll get into that in a minute. You need to know that transduction takes place on the retina. The retina has photoreceptors, so there's not a specific number for this on your diagram. But photoreceptors are light-sensitive cells or neurons in the retina that help convert light energy into those impulses. The 2 different ones that you need to know are the rods and the cones. The rods are the retina receptors that detect black, white, and gray. They're necessary for peripheral vision, so they help us identify stuff on the side. Like if we're at the side of our face, we can understand kind of what's there because of the rods. It helps with nighttime vision. Like it says here, these are the photoreceptors, especially sensitive to dim light, and they don't help us with color. There's 125 million in an eye. They help with our peripheral vision, and they don't really help us understand like details of things. Okay, and we're going to go over some scenarios of this in class. Cones then are the retinal receptors that are concentrated near the center of the retina that function in daylight and as well as in lit conditions. It helps, our cones help us really identify the different details of things. Photoreceptors that are usually sensitive to color but not dim light. There are 7 million in an eye, so there's fewer, obviously, cones. Cones are responsible to help us see colors, and they're located in the center of the eye. So I remember cones, colors, CC, okay, and then rods are the black and white. Okay, number 6 on your diagram is the fovea. The fovea is the area on the retina that has the sharpest vision. Okay, it has the highest concentrations of rods and cones. It is all the way in the back, pretty much by your optic nerve. You can see it's at the back of the eye. So the retina pretty much is the consisting tissue kind of all around the back of the eye, but this is pretty much the area that is specifically right. You can see it's below the optic nerve. Okay, the optic nerve and the blind spot. Number 7 is your optic nerve. This is the bundle of neurons that carries the visual information from the retina. So now it's taking information from your retina all the way to the brain. Okay, it can send nearly 1 million messages at once through its nearly 1 million ganglion fibers. Okay, ganglion and bipolar cells help in this process from sending the information to your brain. Specifically, it's going to go to the thalamus first, okay, and then once it gets to the thalamus, it's then going to go to your visual cortex or your occipital lobes. The blind spot then is the point where the optic nerve exits the eye and there's no photoreceptors there, so there's actually a part of the eye that doesn't help with any vision, okay. Any stimulus that falls on this area cannot be seen. So now that you pretty much understand parts of the eye, let's kind of take a look at how vision works. The receptor for vision is the eye again, and the way that it's actually going to allow us to see is the stimulus of light. Okay, so let's kind of go through the steps one more time about how we see. Okay, so at first you might kind of want to copy this down. First, light enters through the cornea, passes through the cornea, which is that kind of protective shield. It then will go through the pupil. Okay, the pupil is either going to allow a lot of light in or a little bit of the light in, and that's going to be based on whether the iris is going to move up or down, kind of like contract or kind of expand. Once it then gets through the pupil, it's going to then hit the lens, and the lens is going to help focus the light. Okay, is it going to allow you to see the sharp objects, or it's going to have blurred vision? It then goes to basically the retina. Okay, and then the retina is where, again, it changes to neural impulses. So the eye transduces the characteristics of light into neural signals that the brain can process. Transduction happens in the retina, the light-sensitive layers of the cell at the back of the eye. Okay, you obviously have cones that are going to let you see color, and rods allow you to see black and white. Then the information is going to go to the optic nerve, and from the optic nerve, it'll go to the thalamus, and then the visual cortex. So make sure you understand how light enters the eye and gets its way up to the brain. All right, now let's talk about the stimulus, which is light. Okay, the stimulus for vision is light. Our eyes, the receptors, pick up impulses of electromagnetic energy that our visual systems understand and help us perceive as color. The spectrum ranges from short gamma waves to long waves, which make up different colors. Different animals are sensitive to different portions of the spectrum. For instance, bees can't see red. So you have the spectrum of light here, okay, or the spectrum of visual light that we can see, right? It goes from red, orange, yellow, green, blue, violet, okay? So the light spectrum, as I've heard, is ROY, R-O-Y, G, and then BIV, blue, indigo, and violet, which indigo is not mentioned on here. Okay, there's two characteristics of light you need to know, and this is the wavelength and intensity. Okay, the wavelength is the distance from peak to the next peak, and this helps understand color. Okay, intensity is the amount of energy in the light waves. This will influence the brightness, so how tall the wave actually is. Okay, so is an example of the different properties of waves. Okay, so you have the waves here. All right, you have really short wavelengths. Okay, that's going to influence the color blue. And if you have really long wavelengths, that's going to influence a more red color. Okay, so it's looking from peak to peak is where the wavelength is measuring. Okay, the shorter it is from peak to peak, the bluer the indigo color it's going to have. The longer the wavelength it has, the red, potentially the orange, maybe yellow, okay, it's going to have a color that's more on that color spectrum. So it goes from peak to peak for wavelength. And I would draw these images in your packet. For looking at intensity here, okay, the taller the wave, the brighter the color it's going to be. Okay, so the more, let's say like the more brightness the color that it's going to have, and then the smaller the amplitude, so the shorter the wave, the duller the colors they're going to be. Okay? Okay, so the lens is the part of the eye that helps understand or gives you the focus. So if you have problems with focusing, you could have problems with nearsightedness or farsightedness. Okay, nearsightedness, myopia, is a common vision condition in which you can see objects near to you, however you can see far away. It's very blurry. So nearsighted, you're good, okay? But understanding other objects far away becomes really blurry. The degree of which nearsightedness affects your ability to focus on distant objects. People with severe nearsightedness can see clearly only objects just a few inches away, and those with mild nearsightedness may clearly see images up to several yards away, but then anything in their far distance they struggle with. Nearsightedness may develop gradually or rapidly, often worsening during childhood and adolescence. Nearsightedness tends to run in families. Okay, and then you have farsightedness. Okay, hyperopia is a common vision condition in which you can see distant objects clearly. Okay, but then things close up can be really blurry. The degree of your farsightedness determines your focus ability. People with severe farsightedness may see clearly only objects a great distance away, while those with mild farsightedness may be able to clearly see objects that are closer. So farsightedness usually is presented at birth and tends to run in families. You can easily correct this condition with eyeglasses or contacts. Okay. And I know that they also have surgeries for it as well. So farsighted, okay, is the common condition where you can see distance, but then things that are like up close are really blurry. Okay, so to recap, you should understand the parts of the eye. You should understand light in the light spectrum. You should understand the steps on which how vision actually passes through the eye, and then you should understand maybe two different types of vision problems.